Eric VII Durrandon was king in the Stormlands when the Andal longships first began to cross the Narrow Sea. History remembers him as Eric the Unready, for he took little note of these invaders, famously declaring that he had no interest in the quarrels of strangers in a land far away. At first, the Andals' focus was mainly in the Vale. However, soon their gaze spread further, until eventually the Stormlands itself. The Storm King was embroiled in his own wars at the time and saw no trouble from the invaders. He was attempting to reconquer Massey's Hook from his infamous pirate king, Justin Milkai, while trying to fend off more incursions from the Dornish king, Oliver Ironwood. Nor did Eric live to see the result of his inaction, for the Andals remained occupied with their conquest of the Vale for the rest of his lifetime. So some could argue that in the context of his situation, Eric did the correct thing, focusing on the issues at hand within the reach of the borders of his kingdom. It was a generation later when Eric's grandson, King Carlton II Durrandon, was the first to face the Andals in battle, but these were just minor border skirmishes and not a troubling issue for the king. After 4 generations of war, the monarch who styled himself Carlton the Conqueror finally completed the reconquest of Massey's Hook, taking Stormlands after a year's siege and slaying the last of the kings of House Massey, Joshua the Soft Spear. The Storm King held his conquest for less than 2 years, however. An Andal warlord named Torrhagen Bar Eman, also called Torrhagen the Terrible, had established his own small petty kingdom north of the Blackwater, but was being hard-pressed by the Darkling kings of Duskendale. Sensing weakness to the south, Torrhagen took to wife the daughter of Joshua Softspear and crossed Blackwater Bay with all his power to establish a new kingdom on Massey's Hook. He built his own castle at Sharp Point, at the Hook's End, whilst driving the Stormlanders from Stonedance and setting his wife's brother to rule there as a puppet, dancing to his strings. Carlton the Conqueror soon had more serious woes to concern him than the loss of Massey's Hook. With the Vale now firmly under the control of the Andals, the eye of the Andals had turned south and longships had begun to come ashore all up and down his coasts, full of hungry men with a 7-pointed star painted on their shields and chests and brows, all of them bent on carving out their own petty kingdom. For the rest of his reign, and that of his son and grandson Carlton III and Monfred V, were times of almost constant war, as more and more Andals landed on the shores of the Stormlands. Though the Storm Kings won 6 major battles, the greatest of these being the Battle of Bronzegate, when Monfred V Durrandon defeated the Holy Brotherhood of the Andals, an alliance of 7 petty kings and warlords, at the cost of his own life. The longships just kept coming. It was said that for every Andal who fell in battle, 5 more came wading ashore. Tarth was the first of the Stormlands to be overwhelmed. Estamont soon followed. As hard as these islands were to capture, they were equally as hard to take back, and with the focus of the Storm King securing the mainland, the Andals were given a chance to secure their new holdings. The Andals established themselves on Cape Wrath as well, and might well have taken all of the Rainwood if they had not proved as willing to make war on one another as upon the kingdoms of the first men. But King Baldric I Durrandon, also known as the Cunning, proved expert at setting them one against the other, and King Durrandon XXI took the unprecedented step of seeking out the few remaining children of the forest in the caves and hollow hills where they had taken refuge, and making common cause with them against the foe from beyond the sea. Their shared worship of the old gods allowed for this uneasy alliance. In battles fought at Blackbog, in the Mistwood, and beneath the Howling Hills, the precise locations of which have sadly been lost to time, this weirwood alliance dealt the Andals a series of stinging defeats and checked the decline of the Storm Kings for a time. An even more unlikely alliance between Cleodon I and 3 Dornish kings won even more telling victories over Drox the Corpsemaker on the River Slane near Stonehelm a generation later. For the Stormlanders to align themselves with the Dornish, their mortal enemies, shows the danger the first men faced from the Andal invaders. Yet it is an error to assert that the Storm Kings turned back the invaders. For all their victories, they never managed to stem the Andal tide, though many Andal kings and warlords ended up with their heads impaled upon the spikes above the gates of Storm's End. Still, the Andals kept coming. The reverse is also true. The Andals never truly conquered the line of the Durrandons. 7 times they laid siege to Storm's End, or sought to storm its mighty walls. History tells us 7 times they failed. The 7th failure was seen as a sign from the gods. After that, no further assaults were made. In the end, the two sides simply came together. King Malcolm IV took an Andal maiden as his wife, as did his son, Durrandon the 24th, known as Durrandon Half-Blood. Andal war chiefs became lords and petty kings, wedding the daughters of Stormlanders, and in turn giving them their own daughters, and swearing their swords to Storm's End. Led by King Ormond III and his queen, the Stormlanders put aside their old gods and took up the gods of the Andals, the faith of the Seven. As the centuries passed, the two races of men became one, and the children of the forest were all but forgotten, banished entirely from the Rainwood and the whole of the Stormlands. House Durrandon reached its greatest height in the epoch that followed, during the Age of 100 Kingdoms. King Arlan I, the Avenger, swept all before him, extending the borders of his new kingdom as far back as the Blackwater Rush and the headwaters of the Mander. His great-grandson, King Arlan III, crossed both the Blackwater and the Trident, and claimed the Riverlands in their entirety, at one point planting his crowned stag banner on the shores of the Sunset Sea. However, with the death of Arlan III, an inevitable decline began, for the Stormlands were stretched too thin to hold this vast kingdom together. Rebellion followed rebellion. Petty kings sprang up like weeds. Castles and keeps fell away, and then the Ironborn came, led by Harwin Hardhand, king of the Iron Islands, and slowly the kingdom of the Stormlands was eroded. Even as the Stormlanders reeled back before the Iron Men in the north, the Dornish came swarming over the Boneway to press them in the south. The kings of the Reach sent their knights forth from Highgarden to reclaim all that had been lost in the west. The kingdom of the Storm shrank, king by king, battle by battle, year on year. The fall was halted briefly when a fierce warrior prince, Argilac, called Argilac the Arrogant, donned the stag's crown. But even a man mighty as he could only stay the tide and not turn it back. He was the last of the Storm Kings, the last of the Durrandon line. Argilac regained some of the glory of the Stormlands for a time, but near the end of his life, when he had grown old, King Argilac made a clumsy attempt to use House Targaryen of Dragonstone as a shield against the growing might of the Iron Men and their new king, Harren the Black, who was threatening the borders of the Stormlands. Never grasp a dragon by the tail, the old proverb says. Argilac the Arrogant did just that, and succeeded only in turning the eye of Aegon Targaryen and his sisters westward, when they came ashore at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush to begin their conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. With them came a black-eyed, black-haired bastard half-brother named Orys Baratheon, the man that would bring the kingdom of the Storm Kings crashing down once and for all, and end the ancient line of the Durrandon kings.